group. I think.
Great. Thank you. Off you go.
Did you hear me? I said, that's a pretty mean looking group. I think I'll run. Greetings.
You haven't seen them right
Yeah.
from the back of the room.
I know a lot of you, and we certainly appreciate you guys having us over, and we'll try to make this as interesting and as informative as we can. I just noted that it was 34 years ago that I met Ricky White this month, May the 25th, 1990. So we've been doing this a while. And just to kind of give you an idea, Ricky first went to Larry Ray Harris. Most of you know who Larry Ray is, and I still miss him. He was my partner in crime back in those days before he passed away. But he went to Ricky first, and finally Larry Ray said, let's go tell Gary. And they came to the Assassination Information Center there in Dallas, and we met for the first time. And Ricky told me the story about his daddy. And I was blown away by the story, but I was also blown away by the honesty and the sincerity with which Ricky told the story. And so we began on this long journey of trying to find out what was true and what was false. And here we are today. We finally put a book out. I've been meaning to do it for at least 30 years. And finally, Mr. Edwards decided to help me out. And we got this thing written. So it's out there. We hope it's going to be not only helpful to the case, but perhaps lead us in some directions that will help us expose more of the truth about what happened November 22nd, 1963. So that's my off the cuff introduction to this. And Ricky, you want to say anything about that?
You're accurate. You're right on the money.
Okay. Brian, you jump in here.
It was in 1990, I believe it was 1990, after the press conference, and Gary and was organizing a assassination conference in Dallas, and I think it was like my first or second conference I'd ever been to. And I met Larry Howard briefly, and before the session was over, before the whole conference was over, he came to me, and I guess he had asked Gary or asked somebody about who I was, and found out I was a police officer. And Larry came over to me and handed me kind of covertly handed me a little ticket stub and said, hey, come over to the center at midnight. We're going to show some of the research we're working on. Well, of course I showed up and went into the little theater, about 35 or 40 people at the center. And he showed us the Roscoe White story that he and Gary and Larry had been working on. And it immediately captured my attention, because I thought, what a great cover that would have been for a Dallas policeman to be involved, and nobody would ever have questioned it. So about 5 years ago, Gary asked me if I'd help him write his story, and I said, well, of course I'd be glad to be honored to do that. I said, but if we're going to do this, I'd like to have access to all your files. And he kind of looked at me. Well, I don't share files with everybody. He says it's pretty proprietary. It's my stuff. But I convinced him that he was reluctantly, graciously gave me access to all of his files, and I drove from Dallas to home in Kansas City with 5 of the largest Rubbermaid tubs full of manila folders of Gary Shaw's files, and we've got all that information now. We condensed it into a 360-page book, but we could have written 700 pages, but nobody would have read it. So hopefully everybody that has a copy has read it, and hopefully you enjoy it. And we're going to show you some pictures today, and Gary's going to tell you the story, and Ricky's going to tell his part, his involvement with his recollection of all of his dad's activities, and hopefully you'll enjoy what we have to show you.
Brian, why don't you go ahead and, since you put this slide show together, why don't you go ahead and quickly moderate and just go through the slides?
Okay.
We don't have a great deal of time, and I want to leave as much time as possible for Q&A, because
Okay.
I know you guys probably who have read the book have some questions. And there's a new revelation at the end of our slide presentation that I want to point out, and really shows the reasoning behind our wanting to put this story out, because there's more to be found, more to be learned, more to be understood about this book and about the Roscoe White story. So why don't you do that, Brian, and I'll jump in. Ricky will jump in wherever.
All right. Neil, can you, and I'm sharing my screen. You all can see this, what we've got on the screen here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This was in, we took this at Ricky's residence in 2018. And it's just a picture of the Three Musketeers there.
Just real quickly, I'm sitting down in that picture. Go ahead.
This is a panel that Gary put together, and after we discussed this and wrote this book, we thought, who's a better candidate for an assassin? Was it Oswald or was it Roscoe White? My vote is on Roscoe White, but there's a few things here that Roscoe arranged for his wife to work for Jack Ruby for a couple months before the assassination. Roscoe was a police officer. It was in the academy when the assassination, or hadn't even started the academy yet when the assassination took place, but he had been hired in October. And then coincidentally, Oswald gets a job at the book depository in October, and Roscoe is hired by the police department in October. And we think that certainly has got some sinister connections there, but we don't know what they are. But I believe that Roscoe's employment with the police department was predestined. I mean, they needed him to be on the department, whoever they are, so that he could get on the department and do whatever do his job as he was asked to do.
I might throw in here, Brian, just real quickly, that prior to his coming to the Dallas Police Department, Roscoe was working for Convair. The head of security there was a Navy intelligence guy. He ran the Fort Worth office of Navy intelligence named Mason Langford. And it was Mason Langford who signed off on Roscoe's getting a job with the Dallas Police Department. Langford shows up in numerous other occasions in this story, so he's an important character in all this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we move ahead to October 14th, 1982. There was Ricky's grandfather, Weldon Tolan, passed away in Paris, Texas, and this is the obituary showing that he actually did die. And Ricky and the family, and Ricky and his wife Tricia, and rest of the family that went to Paris and paid their respects. And while the family was gathered at the home, this is a picture of the home. The Tolan home in Paris, Texas, and in the right corner you can see there's a detached shed where Ricky's father had secreted his or hidden his military footlocker, and one of the cousins went out to the shed and found the footlocker and told Ricky to come out. And there's a picture of Ricky standing next to the shed, and there's the footlocker with Roscoe's military memorabilia inside. Rick, jump in any time here and make sure I'm telling the story right.
You're right on.
Okay.
I couldn't tell it, Brian. You're doing a good job.
Okay. So inside the footlocker, this is the actual contents inside the footlocker that Ricky had brought to Gary Shaw, and they took pictures of it. some of the things that you can obviously see. There's a chrome Derringer, a 22 chrome Derringer here, 2-shot Derringer. There's a bank bag, a zippered bank bag right here underneath this scabbard and bayonet. Photographs, first generation photographs from the Dallas police investigation. Letters from home, letters to home, pictures of Oswald, backyard photograph, and up here there is the unknown, unpublished third backyard photograph that Roscoe had in the footlocker. So you've got to ask yourself, how did he get that? Yeah.
By the way, it's the only backyard photograph that was from the original negative. The negatives all disappeared, as y'all know, but he had this one that was from the original negative, according to our Select Committee on Assassination. Go ahead.
And at the bottom of the in the footlocker, we've got a little. I made a little facsimile of Roscoe's diary. Ricky found his father's diary inside the footlocker, and so they packed all this stuff up into a suitcase. They tried to get the trunk into the footlocker into their car to drive back to Midland, and it wouldn't fit. So they put it all in a suitcase, took it home. Just knowing that the property was safe was all, I think, good enough for Rick at the time, but he really didn't have time to go through it because they were both working full time and raising children. So this just sat in a suitcase in their home in Midland, Texas. And here's the original negative of that third backyard picture. So this is not the diary. We'll tell you that story in just a second, but this is a mock-up of what the diary would have looked like. And inside that, Ricky went through it. And Ricky, why don't you tell what your dad had written in that diary, what kind of things he would write?
Brian, that's going to be kind of hard. It's been years since I've actually got to even look at that diary.
Okay.
Or even think about it. So only the things that I told Gary Shaw back when all this was real familiar with me, and he documented it all. I'm really not very sharp and probably not one to really speak out about what was in the diary.
But just so that the audience knows that when you opened the diary, was it in your father's handwriting?
Oh yeah, it was all in a pencil.
Okay.
And he would talk about daily things that they did and through his military. It took me a while to get to the point to where he was involved in the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah. So according to what Ricky has told us, it was this was in '82 when he found the material, and then it was about 4 years later when he finally got around to reading it, and he skipped ahead through the diary to the entry on November 22nd, 1963. And he said he told us that he read it so many times that the words were just burned into his brain. He couldn't believe what his father had written. And at one point, Ricky said that, and I keep saying that Ricky said, but Ricky's with us, but he said that he thought maybe it was a joke or something. So we asked, Gary and I asked Ricky and Tricia independently what you remember about reading it, because he gave it to Tricia to read. And this is what they remember was in the diary. And this is a paraphrasing, but this is what they remember. And basically, Roscoe, in his own handwriting, admits to being involved in the assassination. He identifies two of the other team members, Lebanon and Saul. Mandarin was Roscoe's code name. Says shots fired from upper buildings for diversion, shots fired, target hit, shot from fence, definite hit. Now, it doesn't say I shot from the fence. It just says shot from fence, definite hit. Man on the other side of fence in the way. Shots again from upper buildings. No hit, target open, fired, definite hit. Gun retrieved by man to the side, took to rail car area, the railroad yard. Whirled over the fence, took man down to protect myself, ran around back of fence down embankment. And then he says, and he finished up with drove to Oak Cliff, met officer. I'm assuming that it's Officer Tippit. told officer not to drive by house. I'm assuming that's the rooming house at 1026 North Beckley. Something was wrong, forced to take out officer at 10th and Patton. Now, unless there was another officer taken shot and killed and taken out off at 10th and Patton, that's got to be Tippit. Backtracked the car, drove past the area to take out other passenger. I'm assuming he's talking about whoever Ellie they were looking for. Failed transport subject to Redbird Airport. Realized what a mistake I had made. Back to DPD awaiting information. That's their recollection of both of their recollection of what Roscoe had written. Now, to me, you know, from a law enforcement standpoint, that's pretty good admission. He wrote it down in his own hand, so that's important information. Also in that footlocker was a zippered green bank bag with Wynwood State Bank. And Ricky remembers or told us that he remembers reading in the diary that his father had left a large amount of money for the family, but didn't identify where the money was or how to get access to it. But in this bank bag, there were 2 keys. This one has stamped 203. So, you know, any reasonable thinking person would wonder if that fits a lock at this bank. So Ricky and his mother went to that bank unannounced, and after his father had passed away, and tried to get access to that bank vault. And Ricky, tell us what happened when you went to the bank.
Well, me and my mom showed up at the bank, and my mother showed them papers where she was Geneva White and Roscoe was my dad, and she looked it up, and sure enough, there was a box there that had his name on it. And after a little bit of a conversation, came up that my mother had not probated the will, so she was able to let us see what was in the box, but not allow us to take what was in the box. So she let us into the vault, and the key worked. She set it out on the deal, and when she opened it, I was expecting to see cash, money, and they looked like little booklet deals and paper envelopes, and she was setting them out. And she told us then that those were bear bonds, and she added it all up and gave us a receipt of $250,000 bear bonds.
For those of you that don't know what a bearer bond is, it's an unregistered form of currency that there's no record of who purchases it or where it was purchased. And if you present a bearer bond to the bank, you are the owner, and they will cash. If you ask for cash, they'll cash it out for you. Well, we'll tell you the rest of the story about the bank bag, or about the bonds. But Ricky never got access to them because somebody had removed them from the vault before he went back again.
The FBI did.
Yeah, well, it's FDIC approved, so that means it's under federal jurisdiction. This is inside Wynwood State Bank's safety deposit box area. That's the bank they went to. So this is Al Shorey, the Assistant District Attorney of Midland County when Ricky and Tricia lived in Midland, Texas. And Ricky, tell us what you did, how you came to ask Al Shorey for assistance in trying to get this money out of that box.
A friend of mine told me that he would probate the will for nothing. So I went up there to talk to him that one day and told him what I was trying to do, and he didn't have a problem with helping me. And after that, it kind of seems like he drug his feet for a long time just to probate a will, and he kept calling me and wanting to come to the house, and he got this guy involved in it his name was J.D. Lucky. He was his #1 investigator, and so evidently they were putting together some kind of on me, knowing that what they found out about my dad. And I didn't really tell him my dad was involved in the Kennedy assassination. I just said that he had a large amount of money that he had left me and my mom at this bank. And that's all it took.
So your next contact with anybody is that was in November of '87, and in December of '87, without even talking to Ricky or looking at any of the information or following up on what he had told Al Shorey, the FBI decided to initiate surveillance on Ricky and his wife, Tricia, for no reason. They hadn't committed any crime. They weren't suspected of being involved in any criminal activity, but yet the FBI decided to do surveillance on them. And these are the logs that Gary got from the FBI showing that they did, in fact, do 2 different dates, 31st of December and January the 2nd. They followed them. Of course, they weren't really good, but they didn't get them. They hadn't done anything. So what would the point be of FBI involved in that? And that was the last contact was in January of '88.
That's right.
So January 13th. Rick, tell what happened on January 13th.
I'd already gone to work, and I hadn't even pulled up to my job when my boss was standing outside pacing up and down. And yeah, I could tell that something wasn't right. When I got out of the car, he told me I needed to go home, but the FBI was at my house. So I drove back home. Sure enough, there was a car parked out in front of the house. 2 agents got out and needed me at the back of the deal, and one of them pulled out a federal book telling me that I was withholding evidence of the assassination, and I could spend $10,000 or 10 years in penitentiary if I didn't let them in my house. So I didn't take that as a go. So I said, give me 11. So I went in and called Trish's cousin. He was an attorney here in Dallas. And so I asked him, and he told me, he said, man, I'm going to tell you the truth. If they want to tear your house down, you give them a hammer and saw to let them in. So I went outside and told them to come in. And it's real funny because they knew right where everything was. But I had 2 boxes sitting outside in the garage, and I went out and got them. But they knew everything and secured everything right there at my game room where all the stuff was gathered out on the pool table. But let me go back just one more step. The day before they came, I had a real good friend named Skip Baca that worked for Chevron, told me of his friend. His name was Jerry Smith. He was an attorney. He come to the house the day before the FBI came, and I told him all about what the story was, and I scared him. And he told me to take him back to the airport because this was above his pay grade. So I took him to the airport, and it's just real weird that the next day, and I always thought it was Jerry Smith that was the one that called the FBI on me because I just talked to him the day before. He was scared to death. Now the FBI is at my house. I didn't realize it was Al Shorey all along, planning this from the beginning after I left out of his office, must have been. But anyway, our babysitter, her name is Nisi. She's the one that she stayed at our house, took care of our kids. And they're the first persons they knocked on the door and told Nisi. And she's the one that called my work. And she's scared to death. And she's crying because she don't know what's about to go on. But anyway, I let them in the house. I gathered up everything in the box. They followed me all the way out to my car, and they let me put the material not in their car, but in my car. And they told me to follow them to the federal building. And I'd be honest with you, I didn't know that Midland had a federal building. I thought we were fixing to go to Dallas or somewhere. And we went to their office and on the 2nd or 3rd floors where they carried me, and they carried me into a room. You couldn't get out without a card. So they had me. And everything they were pulling out of that box, they were tearing down. So, and it's real funny that there was a guy on a speakerphone. I now know it was Arlen Specter, and he's grilling me all along there for about the 45 minutes to an hour that I was in that room, scared to death. So after I was finished, they let me go, but they took copies of the safety deposit box keys, and they took pictures of the diary and everything. They let me take all that home. So I'm at home laying on the bed because I'm crying, y'all. I'm scared to death. And the doorbell went off, and Trish was in there. She said she was going to go answer it. And she went open the door. And then the next thing I know, she's opening the door, and she says, hey, it's FBI's here. And he said he left his yellow notebook in your box. So she allowed him to come in. And that's when she come and told me that. And then when he came back, he told her on the way out he got what he needed. So I took that stuff to my mother's house because I didn't want to have anything to do with it. It's done for me, really. And when I carried it over there is when we found out the diary was missing.
So it sounds like the FBI agent that came to your home basically stole that diary of all the things that were in that box. Is that right?
After I think about it, Brian, his stuff was not with my stuff. His yellow notebook could have never been in my box because my box is on a whole different table than they were.
Yeah.
Everything coming off of the table onto into the other box. I just can't see him leaving his notebook in my stuff, and I carried it home.
No. That was just an excuse to get that notebook or get that diary.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So here, this is so in July of 1990, Larry Howard, Larry Harris, and J. Gary Shaw have
and Bud Finsterwald.
And Bud Finsterwald, that's Bud there. Have a press conference at the Assassination Information Center and basically tell the world and the assembled media about the Roscoe White story. Ricky or Gary, you want to mention anything about that?
Well, not really, but I can tell you you can see from the microphones on the podium there that just about every news media in the country were there. Earl Golds, the day before, had in the Austin American Statesman, had done a full story about Ricky and Roscoe. And we held the press conference the next day, and the media were all there. And it went out across the country. And of course, most of it was derogatory because, in my opinion, the press was controlled even then. And they made light of the story, and with various officials spoke out against it without ever having seen anything that we had at that time. By the time we had this press conference, we had also found the canister with the cables and the green book in it, and so let's go on with that.
Okay, so Rick, so in 1990, Ricky went back to the home on a tip from his mother, who said that there might be some other material there. You better get it out of there. So Rick went back and in the attic found this steel grade or steel canister, watertight canister in the attic, and took it home and opened it, and inside it were these items. They're Roscoe's single dog tag, 2 newspaper clippings inside of were sealed inside plastic laminate, one from September 24th and the other one from April 1st of 66. And this is a close-up of the dog tag, so there's no doubt who the owner of that dog tag was, and if it's inside that canister, it's reasonably assuming that that's his material. That's Roscoe's serial number. Blood type is A, United States Marine Corps, and his religious standing. So that's Roscoe's single dog tag. Also in that canister were 3 negatives to 3 pictures, and Ricky's identified for us the people in the photograph. This is Roscoe's mother, so it's got to be Roscoe's. He owned that canister, at least had that canister and put material in it, hoping that somebody would ever find it. And then wrapped inside the perimeter, or the diameter, the inside diameter of the canister, was this another piece of plastic laminate with these 3 pieces of paper on it, or inside of it. And Gary had pictures taken of it, and there was writing or plain text messages on all 3 of these pieces of paper. And these are the best copies of those 3 cables. We call them cables, 3 orders, February 63, September 63, and December 63. And let's look at those real close. So this is the first one that Roscoe received, or Roscoe had put in that canister. It was dated February 63, and it says Navy Int. I take that to see that's Navy intelligence. We don't know what this is. We believe Marine Reserve Center is MRC. Remark data, not sure what. That's Roscoe's serial number. We know that from his dog tag. This is Marine Reserve Center. Gary, what was this one? VDC. Naval Air Center is this one, but the important part is Remarks Mandarin Code A. Foreign assignments have been canceled. The next assignment is to eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. Destination will be Houston, Austin, or Dallas. If they're going to plan, if whoever this is, it's writing this, knew in February that Kennedy was going to go to Houston, Austin, and or Dallas. How did they know that in February? It wasn't arranged until late the summer. Contacts are being arranged now. Orders are subject to change at any time. Reply back if not understood. And it's signed off by C. Bowers, OSHA. We believe OSHA is the Office of Special Handling Activities, whatever that might mean. And down at the bottom of each of these three cables is RE, Rifle Code AAA, destroy on. Basically, I read that as, you know, after you read the assignment, get rid of it. Well, Roscoe kept it. The second cable was dated September 63, the same headings at the top, same serial number, Roscoe Remarks Mandarin, Dallas destination chosen. Your place hidden within the department. Contacts are within this letter. Continue on as planned. Again, C. Bowers, OSHA, Rifle Code A. Destroy. The last one, this was after the assassination, obviously. This was dated December 63. This one has code C. So I don't know what that means. Maybe it means the assignment's completed. Who knows? Stay within the department. Remember, Roscoe started the police academy in December and didn't graduate till February. So he's in the police academy. What he's doing, we don't know. Stay within the department. Witnesses have eyes, ears, and mouths. You know what to do of the mix-up. I don't know what mix-up that refers to. The men will be in to cover all misleading evidence soon. Stay as planned. Wait for further orders. Again, C. Bowers. So they're telling him what to do, how to do it, and what the procedure is now that the assignment is over with. These are important pieces of evidence. Ricky couldn't have made these up. So why did Roscoe keep them for somebody to find for later? I think it was a cover in his butt, basically. Here's the canister. Inside that canister also was this green dictation book. It's a typical dictation course textbook by Graham. And inside that, Rick opened it up, and Roscoe had put his name, wrote his name inside, R.A. White, with his serial number, military serial number. Again, telling us who the owner of this book is, and basically took this book and made it as a scrapbook. And inside go ahead, Gary. Did you have something, Gary?
No,
Okay.
I heard from me. That's exactly what it is a scrapbook.
Yeah. And what he had done, which is really interesting, is Roscoe had took the book, turned it upside down, and starting at the back of the book and going forward, he wrote in pencil, some of them on the margins, and he put newspaper clippings on some. We'll show you some of those. But inside the back cover, Roscoe wrote in his own hand, 28 people died from witness program. Take out rest of people later. So what do we make of that? And then Roscoe, it says Roscoe Anthony White right here. So we know who the owner of that book is. What is this 28 people died from witness program? That's the puzzlement. What is that? Who was in the witness program? Were these
real quick,
yeah.
Brian, down in the lower right-hand corner, there's some scribbling. If anybody can decipher that, I would certainly appreciate hearing from them. It looks like a name or a signature, but I've never been able to determine exactly what that says. But there's other writings and numbers all through the book that need to be looked at closely, and maybe somebody can decipher some of the things that we've been unable to. Go ahead.
And remember, when Roscoe was fatally injured in an industrial accident in 1971, so he couldn't have been writing anything in this book after September of 71. So when Ricky found it, it was 20 years old then, and the lead from the pencil had faded. But there's all these cryptic notes and numbers and letters and dashes and dots. We don't know what they mean. So let's look at some of the key pages of that scrapbook. Remember, this is upside down and backwards. So how many pages were torn out, Gary?
Oh, I don't remember. A number of pages. One of the things that we quickly asked Ricky at the time that he found this, did he do anything to the book after it was found? Because a lot of the pages are torn out, and we wanted to make sure it was just as it was found in the canister, and he assured us that it was. And so there may have been other things in there that Roscoe removed before he buried the thing. I don't know, but hurry on. We're going to run out of time quick.
So this is the moment the world stood still. That tells us what the story's about. This is page 4. It says, now got the head, going tail later. These are all newspaper clippings, and we don't know what newspapers they got out of or when they were put in there, but it's interesting that this was in there. This one.
Go back to that slide right quick. That's an important statement. Now got the head, going tail later. That was not known when Roscoe White died in 1971. That was a terminology used that they had gotten. The president gotten the head. This was a mafia chieftain talking, and that they would go for the tail later. It was obviously said before they had killed Robert Kennedy. So just of interest there.
The man, and this is page 8. This man has not been identified, but if anybody knows who that is or how we could find out who that man is. The strange thing about this scrapbook is a lot of these pictures are in here. We don't know the connection between them and Roscoe or why he would put these pictures in there in this scrapbook. It's a very he's a reoccurring theme across some of these is there's pencil marks across the face of these pictures. We don't know why. This one is this is page 17. This is a famous photograph of Lieutenant Day of the Dallas Police Department crime scene unit holding the rifle up for the media picture. And Roscoe had written in the margin at the bottom here, 7.65 Mauser, our gun, use, kill, President Kennedy, November 22, 63. That's an admission to me of culpability involved in the assassination of Kennedy. This is the newspaper clipping of the Mormon photograph. And again, in the margin, Roscoe wrote, Mandarin kills K, uses 7.65 Mauser in assassination. That's the second admission that he was involved in the assassination. In that left-hand top portion of that Mormon photograph, Roscoe had taken 2 pencil marks and made an X and a little dot and put an X through that behind the picket, of the picket fence, indicating very possibly that's where he was at. He's marking his territory basically behind the fence. So it's right up here. This is a photograph of Roscoe. Roscoe is the number 2 man here. We don't know where this was at or when it was taken, but it's Roscoe and 3 of his beach buddies. Gary, you want to tell them about these guys?
Well, I don't know who these guys are, but I've got a picture of a young man on the far right-hand side of the picture of a guy named Jack Modisette. And he looks very much like the guy to Roscoe's right. And I think it is the same guy. And he has a very particular story. He was with the Office of Naval Intelligence, and he was stationed at Guantanamo Bay. And His dad was in the oil business and partners with John Kennedy's daddy down in Corpus Christi, Texas. And the story just goes on and on. He works with assassins. He meets with David Morales and J.M. Wave in '62. And so he's connected in several different ways, number of different ways. And we can't say for sure that's who it is, but they certainly have a strong resemblance. And it would not be surprising that Roscoe was connected to Jack Modisette. The other two guys to the right, I'd like to know who they are. So if anybody can identify those for me, they get a 50-cent piece.
And if Gary and I are speculating that this was taken at Guantanamo Bay, nowhere in Roscoe's military records does it ever say that he was stationed or actually ever traveled to Guantanamo Bay. So I don't know if that means anything to anybody. Here's an interesting page from the scrapbook. Gary, it's your show, buddy.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's go on through. But particularly that lady who I called a masculine-looking lady and thought it was a female impersonators. Since the book has come out, she's been positively identified, and it's an interesting story. So go ahead.
There
Well,
she
you
is.
got it here. That's okay. This lady is Doris Duke. This is a 1941 press photo, which is where the photograph in Roscoe's scrapbook came from, headshot. And she was called the richest girl in the world. She was the tobacco heiress of the Duke family. Duke University is named after her granddad. But the important thing, I think, is that she married a Dominican Republic guy named Ruby Rosa. And he was alleged to be an assassin. He was a playboy. He dated every famous girl and married several of them. They left him very well off, but he played polo. He was a race car driver. He was at one time married to Trujillo's daughter. And there's been books and articles, many written about him, but he died in 1965, July 1965, in a one-car wreck, as you can see in that picture. He died on the way to the hospital. And is he one of the 28 people that Roscoe was writing about? Was he involved in the assassination? Have you got the picture of the FBI document? Is that next? Here's an FBI document I found, and if you read it, he was talked of being an associate of Jean Canas, whom he was planning to contact in France during June of 1963 concerning gambling enterprises, presumably in the Dominican Republic. Jean Canas himself was to meet Ruby Rosa. So there was a connection, and meeting in June of 1963, that's another story that I'll be telling in the future about that. There was other meeting in Dallas in June of 1963 with mafia heads that's very interesting and connects to this. Okay. This is the kind of thing that we're looking for. My nephew found this old picture of Doris Duke and brought it to me and said, "Isn't this the same gal in that picture?" And bingo, you can tell that it is. And so that's what we're hoping that the book will do. We don't know all the story. We don't know what all this means, but hopefully others can help us find out.
So our last slide is we put this together. You know, why we believe Ricky and why you should believe the story is because Ricky couldn't have made this up. There's no way he could have put all this together. I mean, he's a smart guy, but he's just not. I mean, this would not be something he would come up with on his own. So, I mean, the plain text cables, Ricky talked about that before he even brought the diary, before he even read the diary. knew about that. The honesty and integrity of both Ricky and his wife. They're good, hardworking, God-fearing people. There's no reason for them to make up a story like this. The FBI's swift attack of the story before they even talked to Ricky or before they even saw any evidence, that says that the story is pushing somebody's buttons and they don't want any they want to hide that. The provenance and authenticity of the materials, I mean, it's in Roscoe's hand. Who else could have done that besides Roscoe? Nobody. Roscoe and Oswald were in the Marines at the same time. They sailed together in the Far
You
East.
skipped one.
Oh, sorry. The reaction by the FBI before seeing the material or talking to Ricky. The Roscoe and Oswald were on the same ship, went to the same location for 3 months in Atsugi. Roscoe was hired by the Dallas police at about the same time Oswald got a job at the book depository. Roscoe was, according to Geneva, Roscoe was acquainted with Jack Ruby before he was even hired with the police department. And Roscoe arranged for his wife to work at the Carousel Club before the assassination. So there's no doubt about the connections between Jack Ruby and Roscoe and Oswald. The question is, did Roscoe shoot from the picket fence? We believe he did, because he admitted that twice in documents or in his own hand. So unless he was trying to make a name for himself, we think that's what got him killed, is he wanted out of that program. He didn't want to do that anymore, and it got him killed. The story was he was hurt, seriously hurt at his workplace, and confessed to his minister that he had taken lives on foreign and domestic soil for the country, and he didn't want to do that anymore. And so that's, he went from an asset to a liability, and that's the reason I think he was killed. So, Rick, is there anything you want to add? That's our last slide there.
No, y'all did a great job.
Okay.
Great job.
Okay, that was very interesting, Brian. Thank you. So we've got quite a lot of time for questions. I think there probably will be quite a lot of questions. I certainly have got a few here that I noted as I was reading the book. So I'll just kick off with a few, and then we'll open it up to the floor. But we've got a lot of time to discuss all these revelations. The first question I had was regarding Roscoe's application for the police. In the book, it says it was in December 1962, which is a considerable time ahead of the assassination. Do you think it's possible that this thing was in the offing, was being planned much further back than we originally think?
Oh yeah, I think he was. He hadn't just got out of the Marine Corps. He was discharged in December, and then shortly after that, he applied for a job with the police department. I think that was a preordained deal. I think that was his next assignment, was to get on the police department.
So
you also need to know that investigating a potential hire to a police department requires a real stringent background check, and they were checking him out from stem to stern, so to speak, during that period of time before he finally was hired.
Okay, that makes sense. The second one is, do you have any idea who Lebanon and Saul might have been?
I wish we did. We don't, and hopefully this kind of thing, if the book ever gets a little publicity and gets in the hands of a lot of people, I think we'll learn who they are.
Okay. Next one is going to be, have you tried to seek specialist help to decode the numbers throughout the, let's call it the witness elimination book? Is this something, a computer algorithm could solve?
Ricky, why don't you tell them what transpired here in just the last few days?
A friend of mine, name's David Taylor, he showed up here yesterday, And he was telling me he's an ex-Dallas police officer and
70.
from the 70s. And he's also an ex-Mason. And he was telling me that those numbers at the end of the page could be connected to a familiar language called Pig Latin. And a lot of cops and Masons used Pig Latin back then to be able to communicate to one another. And they don't use an alphabet, they use numbers. And them, go ahead. And them being a set of 3s and 4s in the numbers, he could actually not be telling us about what's on top of the page, but he could be telling us a story.
It's just a thought.
It's just a thought.
Okay. Yeah, the next question. You didn't talk about it in the presentation. What's the story on Joe West, Gary? Do you think he might have been a CIA asset? And do you think he may have been? Do you think he might have pushed Geneva to make up the second diary?
I don't think he. You want to say something, Ricky?
Yeah. Reverend Gall and Joe West were the 2 people behind my mother making that fake diary. That I can tell you.
100%.
Okay, Joe West. Joe West was a guy that he liked to call himself a certified legal investigator in the state of Texas, and he used that. He had a real boldness about him, and he came to me after I spoke at their association in Austin back prior to all of this, and he came up to me afterwards and said he'd like to help in it. And so I gave him a lead, and he traced it down, found the guy, and became real interested. I liked his boldness. I liked the fact that he was at least classified as a certified legal investigator. I liked the fact that he had money and was willing to spend it to chase some of these things down. It became a turncoat as far as I was concerned with the Roscoe White story, and tried to direct it more than anybody should have if they were looking for truth. And that was an unfortunate association of mine. I take full responsibility for bringing him in, and I wish that I hadn't. He was exposed before it was over, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Whether he was some kind of agent, disinformation, I don't believe that. I don't believe he was smart enough for that. But.
No. He had his own. That was it. He had his own theories, and he wasn't going to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just a couple of questions for Ricky. Why did you wait 4 years to read your dad's diary?
I just used to walk by and just look at that suitcase. I really don't know why.
We weren't really interested in like the Kennedy assassination.
But we didn't. But at the time, we didn't know that it was going to involve the Kennedy assassination.
We had 2 small children, and it took up all our time.
And I worked at Slumber, working 100 hours a week. It was when I became a salesman for Slumber J that gave me the time and hours to be able to really look into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And why did you just leave the diary on the pool table? I mean, obviously it had some astonishing revelations in it.
I didn't always have that pool table. It would be if I was working on it that weekend and I left it just accidentally. It was not it was something I always tried to keep put up. Believe me, the time. But I had it all out just to be able to move stuff around where I was trying to put stuff together. To be honest with you. And the diary didn't sound near as important now than it did to me when I was reading it, y'all. I didn't know anybody was fixing to come in my house and take nothing. And I really didn't even know what I was doing, y'all. I was a young man trying to figure out, to be honest with you, I was really just more interested in the money, the safety deposit box. I wasn't really willing to be able to tell the story until they come and got all my stuff. And when they did, I was so mad, angry that I let somebody do that to me. And I had no way to tell nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And Neil, that's part of the problem is the initial exposure to this story was that, well, you don't have the diary, so you don't have the story, and you probably made up the diary. Well, we've talked to Ricky, you can verify this for me, make sure I'm telling it right. But there's at least 5 people that saw that diary, and we've talked to 2 of them. And Tricia read it. So there's at least 5 people that saw that diary, knew it existed. So there's no doubt that that diary was a real artifact in that footlocker.
Did you get to speak to the babysitter?
Yes. Yes.
Important.
And record.
The really, besides Tricia, until the story came out, I really didn't ever know that anybody ever besides me and her ever saw the diary, because I just didn't keep it around everywhere. But Niecy and Dougie knew that it was in there. They both read it. They both seen it, you know. And then people I worked for, I didn't know that they were going through my briefcase when I was doing other things. People are more nosier than you really can imagine. But anyway, there's your 5 people. That's
Mm-hmm. And
just as a kind of a sidelight, one of the things that Ricky remembered was that he talked about several operations over in the Far East when he was over there. One of them was called Operation Tulungan, which was a huge operation of the military training exercise over there. Not publicized all that much, and Ricky certainly wouldn't have known about it when he told me that was in there. So I think what was in that diary, besides the confession that he killed Kennedy, was also important to national security, perhaps. He kept a very thorough journal.
And Rick, didn't you say your dad kept that journal updated almost like just maybe 3 or 4 days before he was killed? Yeah. So he was writing in it all the time.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he give up on it.
Okay, that's interesting. Just a couple of questions on the telegrams, the orders. So you did go to someone, Gary, didn't you, to authenticate the language? I can't remember who it was,
there were two CIA agents. One was John Stockwell, who was the chief of station for the CIA at one time. He wrote a book called In Search of Enemies, and he became estranged from the CIA. But he said he saw cables like that or orders like that numerous times in that kind of a format. One of the surprising things is after we had the press conference and the news went out, a former CIA agent came to see us came to see me at the center. And he was particularly interested. He said, yes, he saw many documents like that. He was particularly interested in the one that said contacts are within this letter. Y'all remember that in one of the, I believe it was the second cable. And he said there's either a message encoded in that letter, or there was something attached to that letter that was sent with it, or there was a microdot, and perhaps in it. But he was particularly interested in that, and he scribbled out some code there on a yellow pad for me. But then when he got through, he wadded it up and put it in his pocket and left. He said he'd be in touch with me, and he never was. So, yes, we had some people authenticate that messages like this were passed around. They were, of course, encoded and decoded. I'm sure when Roscoe White, this came into some area that he was used to getting orders from in code, and it was decoded and came to him in the form of this printed message.
I was just wondering, because the dates, said Feb 63, September 63, December 63, and they weren't full, full dates, i.e. the day, the month, and the year. Is that what you would expect?
I don't know. I don't know what I I have no connection with any of those kind of things, and so John Stockwell nor this other man with the CIA, either one questioned those things. I'm more interested in who C. Bowers is, and we're still looking. I have a suspicion that the C is for commander, but it could be the initials of a first name. But we're looking for Mr. Bowers. If anybody can find him, I would appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Let me open it up to the floor then. Thank you for those answers, Gary.
Hi, Gary. How you doing?
All right. How you, Johnny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You doing okay?
Yeah, doing okay. How about you?
I'm okay.
You're doing some good. I'm following you. You're doing some good stuff, as all of you are. But
Thanks, Gary. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So just a question. I've read the book. During the assassination, I just want to clarify, what was Roscoe supposed to be wearing during the assassination?
I guess that's kind of in question. We're not sure that whether a suit or perhaps something that identified him as a police officer, but somebody was with him, and back there. The best description I guess we have is from Hoffman, who saw the shooter from a distance. Brian, what did Hoffman tell you?
Ed said that he saw two men behind the fence. One was wearing a uniform, but it didn't have a hat, and he said he could tell it was a police uniform because when the man turned, he saw the shoulder patch and he saw a badge. He obviously didn't, from that distance, didn't know it was a police badge or what it said, Dallas Police. But he said the man had a badge on his left side of his uniform and he had a shoulder patch. Didn't have a hat on. He says that's assuming that was a Dallas police officer. What's interesting also is the morning of the assassination, Geneva told the HSCA when they interviewed her that the morning of the assassination, Roscoe left the house wearing a shirt and tie and carried a uniform on a hanger when he left the house. So, again, he was not in the academy yet. It didn't start till December. So what would he have been doing in a suit and tie or shirt and tie and carrying his uniform? Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I have my thoughts, but it's just, speculation.
Brian, have you seen the Darnell film?
Yes.
Where he's interviewing Sitzman, and you can see behind where the Robert Groden pitch is, what looks like a police officer, and you can see the left upper arm, what looks like a badge insignia, and he's hatless. Have you seen that? Have you seen that footage?
Yeah.
You've seen it, yeah.
And remember, if some of you don't know, maybe you do. Beverly Oliver said that immediately after the shots were fired, she looked up towards the knoll and saw Roscoe. She identified him as Geneva's husband. She didn't know at the time what his name was, but he was coming down the knoll steps wearing a police uniform with no hat and nor did not have a gun belt on. So there's two independent witnesses that saw Roscoe. And on top of that, Bobby Hargis, and if you have a chance to look at YouTube, type in Bobby Hargis interview JFK assassination. Bobby Hargis identified Roscoe by name immediately after he ran up the knoll, after Hargis got off his motorcycle, ran up the knoll, and encountered Roscoe White. My question would have been a follow-up question is, how did you know who Roscoe White was? Again, the academy didn't start till December, and this is November. How would a veteran officer know who this guy was unless he saw a name tag? But it would have just said White, last name. but Roscoe White was identified by Bobby Hargis on the grassy knoll immediately after the assassination. So now we have 3 independent witnesses that said Roscoe White was on the grassy knoll at the time of the shooting.
One of the best witnesses we have is Lee Bowers, and of course, Mr. Bowers describes 2 men behind the picket fence. One was a middle-aged guy, quite heavy set, in his 40s, I think it was, and the other guy was a young guy, about 25 to 30, and he was wearing a plaid shirt,
Right.
or a kind of plaid whatever. Do you would, in your opinion, would that description from Bowers jibe with Roscoe White being on the grassy knoll?
No. You know, if I was going to set this up from a counter sniper situation, I'd have backup to backup to backup. I'd make sure that somebody is going to be able to be successful. So Bowers obviously saw somebody back there. Ed Hoffman saw somebody back there. Whether they saw the same person, we can't ask them because they're deceased. But Bowers may have seen another team,
or he may have seen the people who were to get them out of the area.
Yeah,
they were driving cars,
and you remember. I'm sorry, Gary. Go ahead.
One of them was talking over a walkie-talkie or something, so he had some connection, I believe, to it.
And you remember from the diary where Roscoe wrote, "Whirled over the fence to took man down to protect myself. Gun retrieved by man to the side. Took to rail car area." That's exactly the same scenario that Ed Hoffman saw. He said, you know, the one guy with the rifle gave it to another person who ran down the fence line, who then tossed it underhanded to a man standing by the railroad switch box. That's exactly what Roscoe wrote in the book. Gave it to another man who ran it to the rail car area. So that Bowers, we don't know what Bowers saw because Mark Lane never asked those kind of questions, but he said that there was definitely men behind the fence who he did not recognize.
We're sorry that this has to be speculative. We wish we knew more. Unfortunately, we don't have any film of or recording of what happened that day, and we're doing best just like you are. We're suggesting things sometimes, and we speculate, but you can't nail this down with the information that we have. I believe there's more information out there that you and I will be receiving in the future. I think my opinion is you're not going to find the truth in the documents. Yeah. If there was ever any document that gave any indication as to who might have been involved in the killing of Kennedy, it was deep sixed a long time ago, if it was ever made into a document in the first place. So I think there's people out there that are about ready to tell more about what they know about that day 60 some odd years ago now.
And I want to throw this out. I mentioned that I was a police officer. I did 22 years of police work here in Kansas, and during that time interviewed a lot of people, victims and suspects and witnesses. There were 3 people that I've interviewed in the Kennedy assassination over the past 50 years that I can tell you without doubt, 100% credible, would be Ed Hoffman, Ricky White, and Beverly Oliver. Those 3 people have not swayed in any degree of their story. They've told what they know, and that's what we have to deal with. But if there are people out there, not your group, but there are people out there that say the whole Roscoe White story is a hoax. Well, if it is a hoax, prove to us that it's a hoax. Show us the evidence that you have that it's a hoax. Nobody has done that. So that's the reason I wanted to help Gary write the story, because I believed in it 100% from the first moment I saw the Roscoe White evidence. So that's my soapbox.
Gary, with respect to Bud and the two Larrys, is there anything suspicious about how they passed?
Well, I think, you know, you can draw your own conclusions. Five of them. There were five of us involved in this thing. I'm the only one left that originated this thing. Does that mean I'm an agent and I have cover and they're protecting me? But you know, the main one who passed was Bud Fensterwall, and I will tell you this: he was heavily involved in this. He was calling up the FBI and calling out the FBI and filing, you know, freedom of information lawsuits left and right. He and I filed about 30 or 40 ourselves, trying to get information out of the FBI. But he's the guy who financed the Assassination Information Center in Dallas. He's the guy who financed the AARC in Washington. He's the guy filing all the lawsuits. And he and I were writing a book about the CIA when he died. He left my home after being with me about a week here in Cleveland, Texas, flew home and died suddenly. So he was a very important cog in the Roscoe White story. So suspicious, you know, Joe West suddenly died of a heart attack. Larry Harris is in a car wreck and is killed. Larry Howard's doing I don't know what and passes away suddenly, all at a young age. Bud was the oldest; he was 69, and you know, I guess Larry at age 45 was the youngest. But within about 5-year period, they're all gone. So you can read into that what you want to, but there you go.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Wish I knew.
And this story, you know, still is hitting nerves on some people, because in the book we highlighted a passage that Ricky and Tricia had shared with us that had just happened in July of 2023, that they received a phone call from an unknown person, but the phone came up, the phone number came up on was it Ricky, your phone or Tricia's phone?
Her phone.
Okay.
Her phone.
Phone number that they knew came up on Tricia's phone, and she answered it. And this man said that obviously you weren't listening to me when we told you 30 years ago that we start with your firstborn, and then hung up. So we're making somebody mad, and that's good, because that means they're paying attention. So you know, there's reason to believe that we're on the right track. It's just a matter of filling in the blanks. And that's why we're asking people for help on these pictures and decoding these things. If we could learn that, then we probably have a better handle on what happened on that day.
I will say about Bud. He and I were at odds on whether to have a press conference when we did. I opposed it. I thought we needed more investigation, more research, and so forth. And he wrote me a letter, handwritten letter, and he said we need to do it and do it now, or somebody was going to be hurt, something to that effect. It's in the book, the letter, full letter, you know. But he was concerned about Ricky and Tricia, and even perhaps the rest of us. His thoughts were always get the information out there. In spreading the information around, there's some safety in preserving the information and maybe preserving the health and welfare of the individual.
Gary, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
What was the opinion of your fellow first-generation researchers on the Roscoe White story? People like Mark Lane or Harold Weisberg. Did they ever comment on the story or were intrigued by it?
Of course, I think Mark Lane was passed by that time, and so was Harold Weisberg. No, Harold Weisberg was alive because he didn't like the story. You know,
Mark. I met him on 5. So was Mark Lane. I met him on Larry King Live.
Did you? Okay. Okay. What did he say?
Mark, he said that we were on the right track.
Uh,
Believed that he was 100%. Larry King told me, I got a dear friend that believes 100% behind the scenes wants to meet it. And that's why that whole thing went really good with me and Larry, because he was already behind me because of Mark Lane. Mark Lane, I found out, were a good friend. So the person he was talking about to me when I got out was Mark. I would have gave Mark Lane a lot more time, but Bud Funsterwall was downstairs waiting on me. So, and he was late. So I didn't get to visit Mark Lane a whole lot. Besides, he told me that we were on the right track.
Thank you.
I got another question. How many dog tags does a serviceman get or have? Is it just the one?
No, you get 2.
well, but he re-enlisted
Yeah.
at one time.
Probably got 2 more.
He could have had 4.
Yeah.
4 of them in availability. My aunt has 2 of them. I have 1, and there's another one somewhere in my junk.
So to speak. There's a very interesting fact when you go through the chronology at the end of the book. I don't know if you can comment on this. Is this just a really weird coincidence? But you state that Carol Tyler, who was Bobby Baker's secretary, died in an airplane crash in 1965. And Tyler's roommate was Mary Jo of Chappaquiddick.
Yeah.
Fame. I mean, that's just an unbelievable coincidence, or is it? Is there something you want to say on that?
Well, all of those women, that are connected, that are somehow connected to the book because of the what's her name, the black-headed lady that we identified in there, who was
Duke.
No, the other there's 2 women that we identify in there that were mistresses of John Kennedy's.
Was it Russian?
And
Romesh?
Go ahead. What?
Ellen Romesh, was it?
Yeah, Ellen Romesh. Romatish is the way you pronounce it. And her connection and the trip that she makes with Bobby Baker down to New Orleans, and they won't talk about what they did and all that. But she's found in the Coup in Dallas book, Pierre Lafitte's story. And so all of that intertwines, and the connections, as y'all know, are many and multifaceted in this case. And guilt by association, if that worked, there'd be a lot of ties. See, I knew Jack Ruby. Y'all might want to throw me in the bunch too, because guilt by association will get
everybody.
And these kind of covert operations, they use people that they've used before, who they trust, and will do the job without going to the media or telling friends. So these same names come up is not a surprise to me. It's a small world after all. Like Walt Disney said, the same circle of people are used over and over and over again until they become a liability. And that's what happened to Roscoe. He became a liability and threatened to expose it all. And they said, no, that's not going to happen. So.
I read somewhere, I don't know if Ricky wants to comment on this or any of you guys, but that Roscoe had an affair with a lady who worked at the TSBD. Is that a myth, or is that a credible anecdote?
We're not sure, actually. Her
Hazel.
name is either Hazel or Helen. Okay, Rick, go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, my mother just told us of a story of my mother or my father having an affair. A lady named Hazel that worked at Jaggers and Childs and Stovall.
Mm-hmm.
not the deposit.
So the depository is just erroneous, is it?
Right.
But that
Right.
was where all were.
But obviously, yeah.
Yeah, it was at Jaggers Childs. That's where she worked. We're still trying to, and according to the documents that Gary has, this woman, this Hazel, we're trying to figure out the last name, but they lived on the same block or within a block of where Ricky and his family, Roscoe and his family lived. The irony of it is that Geneva told her psychiatrist that that her husband had an affair, and she caught them at it, and that's verification. At least, there's no reason. Why would you lie about that? But that she worked at the book depository was not true.
Okay, thank you for setting the record straight there. So, Ross, Ricky, you guys moved you were in South Oakcliffe, deep South Oakcliffe. You moved to a house opposite Bill Anglin and
On Glen Cairn.
and Marie Tippit of the Tippit family. Was there anything? Do you think there was anything nefarious about that at all, or was it just Cop Hill, and that's where a bunch of policemen lived?
That would have been on Nottingham, and Miss Oswald, she lived about 2 blocks, I guess, just south of us towards the school. I used to walk with, I guess her name's Rachel or whatever.
Yeah.
I went to school. She was in the same grade I was.
Yeah, Brian actually showed us a photo.
Yes.
At the Fort Worth seminar last year, I think it was. No, I was just referring to Glencairn.
That would have been Tippit's lived.
Yeah, where the Tippit.
I really lived right across the street from them. They lived about 2 or 3 houses down, but we were on the same block as the Tippits.
Yeah.
That's typical. When I first started on the department here in my town, you find out where the other cops live because that's a better, safe neighborhood. So you move there. But that's not untypical. Cops all live in the same area.
So we shouldn't read anything nefarious into that. It's just what you guys do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what we do.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the floor, Mike? Or do you think, no?
This is probably a stupid question, but what year is this diary?
June 63. Yeah, it's just a clarification. Is the diary for the year 1963?
No, it actually, Ricky,
no.
it started right after high school, didn't it?
It started out right when he was in the military, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That would have
been still writing
in 57. So, he kept the
He
diary. He kept the diary from 57 to 71.
Okay, so it wasn't a formal diary. It wasn't a formal diary per se. It was a notebook.
No, it was a diary.
With the diary, it had a little clip on it. It had a little,
It didn't have dates in it. It was.
You can get like a 5-year diary, can't you? But there's still pre-printed dates in. Yeah,
you can get 57 to 71.
No, not that long. But they would have pre-printed dates in. There can be more than.
No, the way Rick described it was just a blank pages with lines on it. There was no formalized data. This day to this day, and he had written that at the top of the page, November 22nd.
Diary on the front.
Yeah, you're right, because that diary would have been that thick, but it was about what, 2 inches thick, Rick? You said.
Yeah.
So I guess you could. It was a clasped, held together. I guess you could call it a journal. It didn't say Did it say diary on it anywhere on the?
No, it was just a black book with a little clasp that locked. It had a button that you put, and it pulled out. It could open it up.
Yeah. And you look at your history of the infamous and the famous people who kept diaries, all the way back from John Wilkes Booth to Marilyn Monroe to Arthur Bremer to Sirhan. All these people are keeping diaries for either self-protection or to say, hey, I it wasn't my idea. I'm just following orders, and here's who the people are. I think that was the purpose of the diary.
Yeah, well, Lafitte as well. Lafitte from the Albarelli book as well.
Quick question. When did Roscoe first apply to join the Dallas Police Department?
December 62.
December 62.
Yeah.
Well, he got hired in October of 63 and didn't start the academy till December the 3rd, and then graduated in 64. So he worked on the department for almost a year to the day. And then they moved to Arkansas.
Yeah, but I was saying there, when did his application form?
December 62.
You just said December 1962.
Well, that's an interesting question, because of all the documents in Roscoe's personnel file at the DPD that we can get access to, his original application is not there. So, it should have been there. I mean, that's the first step to get the job, is you apply, and they keep that. I retired in 2001, and it's still in the files at our city hall, but his is not in the files.
Yeah, I've got a quick question about Roscoe White. When he was at the police force, did he have a job that entailed something to do with photographs? Because in the backyard photograph, the stance looks very much like the stance when he's on the beach when he's on the beach with his pals. He's got the same sort of stance.
Rick, do you remember? That's an obviously a question that needs to be answered. Did your dad ever show any interest in photography? Did he ever take pictures of birthdays and Christmas and all that, or did you ever see any photographic equipment at your houses?
No, I thought his job. Didn't he have a job in the police?
That little room on Nottingham that had the foot locker and the black light and the it was like he made his own photography room out of it.
Yeah, so he had his own dark room in the garage in the house.
Right. Yeah.
But the question from the floor was whether in the police department, whether he worked in the photography section. Is that it?
Yeah.
Even his own wife said, I didn't know. She told the HSCA investigators, I don't know what he did for the police department. So if he got trained in photography, it may have been in the military. Again, if he doesn't start the academy till December, is he working in the photo lab or the crime scene unit or the homicide division between October and November? I don't know. We don't know. There's not enough information.
Yeah, I think the fact that he had all of these Dallas police photographs in the footlocker is an indication that he was either involved in the making of copies. I only know of one other cop who had this kind of material, and that's a guy named Rusty
Livingston.
Rusty Livingston, yeah. But for him to have the only backyard photograph from the original negative, and there are no original negatives to be found, indicates that he had something to do with the photography department there.
The photograph with his three friends on the beach. The way he's standing looks very much like the backyard photograph of Oswald.
Right.
The legs.
Same posture. Yeah, that's what Jack White took that picture, and Jack White used that as a comparison. So it's the same guy.
Yeah.
Brian, so he before he actually entered the police academy, so from early October to early December, would he have just been in civvies? He wouldn't have been issued with a uniform during that period, or not?
That's a good question. Back in the 60s, it may have been different. When I was in the academy, we wore a uniform. We had to get our uniforms before we started the academy because that was our dress of the day. Every day we wore a uniform to the academy. But before that, who was he working with and what was he wearing? I don't know.
In your day, what would you have done when you were in the police?
Well,
before you actually entered formally the academy and wore your uniform, but you had been hired by the force.
I would have been there, I would not have had, I probably would have been sitting at the dispatch center to learn, learn the system, learn the language and the jargon. But as far as participating in anything, you couldn't work, you couldn't even do security detail on a parade because you were not a uniformed certified law enforcement officer. Because if you had to make an arrest, it wouldn't have stood up in court. So what he was doing between October and December, it's anybody's guess.
Yeah, can I, one more question.
Last question.
Okay. Everybody talks about the shooting skills of Oswald, but if Roscoe was the shooter, what were his shooting skills? How good was he with a rifle?
Roscoe every Marine has to qualify every year while they're on active duty at a range at stationary targets. Roscoe qualified, and over those qualifications, Roscoe maintained a level of expert, which is the highest you could get. Now, he was never sent to sniper school. I went to sniper school, but he was just a Marine, and his qualification was expert. Oswald's was barely passing as a minimum of a sharpshooter. I don't know if you can put any weight in that because they were shooting at stationary targets and they had all day to shoot. But somebody had to train him to shoot at moving targets with a rifle. I don't know where he would have learned that. Obviously, the Marines would have been the first place I would look, but there's no way to know where he learned to shoot like that. That would have been a specialized training he would have gone through. But in the Marine Corps, they just shoot at stationary targets 200 yards away, standing, prone, and kneeling. So where he would have learned any specialized training skills for sniper, that's another story.
Thanks.
All right, guys, we're going to have to wrap it up because we've got another presentation shortly. Very much appreciate the fact that you three have turned up today and given us all your insight. I do recommend this book.
Real quick,
if we order it directly, Gary, from Michael, can we get signed copies if anybody's interested in this? Can we still get signed copies, or has that ship sailed?
I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately. But if you can get them to it, bring them into Dallas when you come again, and we'll certainly do that. Yeah.
So if there's a DPU,
let me say something real quick in closing. I just appreciate you guys so much and the work y'all are doing and the help that you've given to this whole case, and we appreciate it. You're a long way from Texas, but there's a lot you can do, and you're doing it. And the only thing I'd urge on you is we need young people. The young people here in this country don't even know who John Kennedy is sometimes, much less anything about the assassination and the problems with it. So y'all keep up the good work. We do appreciate you. If I can help you in any way, you can holler.
Well, we're very grateful for that. We have actually got one young person here, Johnny Cairn, so he does fit the criteria.
Okay.
But no, that's great, guys. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the future in Fort Worth at Chris Gallup's event, or Brian at your event at the DoubleTree, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Johnny wants to shout something out. Hang on.
Gary, what was your thoughts on Dr. Weck's passing recently?
I couldn't hear that, Neil.
Johnny was just asking you to comment on Dr. Weck's passing this week.
Oh.
Well, I knew Dr. Weck real well. I met him early on in this. He was our first keynote speaker when we started the Ask conferences in Dallas. I invited him in, and he was a bombshell. He could talk faster and more accurately and than anybody I was ever around, and so he'll be greatly missed. Love the guy. when Dr. Crenshaw and I came out with the book in 92, he was right behind us. When they came after us from the American Medical Association and JAMA magazine, he was one of the first ones to write them and us and join us in that fight to tell the truth.
Yeah, he's a
So,
legend.
great.
Very much
Great.
a legend. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Gary. Well, look, thanks, Ricky. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Gary. And hope to see you in person, Dallas or Fort Worth in the next year or so. And hopefully you'll come back and, do some updates if you get any, if you make any progress.
Bless you,
Thanks for having us on, Neil.
Yeah. Cheers.